NCAA Football 14 was the last college football video game, until later this year. But for a while, it seemed like it might have been the last college game ever, giving it a near legendary status amongst sports video games. Not only was it likely the last title, but it was also an extremely good game. It's one of the greatest EA Sports football games ever made. Usually the last game in a popular series becomes almost mythical. ESPN NFL 2K5, College Hoops 2K8, NCAA Basketball 10, etc. But what about the titles that release right before the last ones? Games like ESPN NFL Football, aka NFL 2K4, College Hoops 2K7, and NCAA Basketball 09 are all awesome games as well, overshadowed by their slightly younger brothers. And that's exactly the case with NCAA Football 13, a game few discuss today as it's been heavily overshadowed by 14, but for a select few, 13 is actually considered the better game. With much more in-depth recruiting, slightly different gameplay, and the Heisman Challenge mode, 13 offers a slightly different experience that might just be better than NCAA Football 14. Let's take a deeper look at NCAA Football 13, the forgotten, yet underrated precursor to the most popular college football video game ever made. NCAA Football 12 was a really good college football game. Team Builder was added for the first time, and gameplay took some steps forward as well. But back then, a common complaint for NCAA 12 was that the game was too easy and played more like an arcade football title than a simulation one. So EA got to work. For 13, they added 20 new quarterback dropbacks, 25 new pass trajectory zones compared to just one before, 8 new quarterback in-pocket sack avoidance moves, wide receiver awareness icons, more pass animations for things like shovel passes, the ability to abort play action after the snap, the ability to pitch while being tackled, new hot routes such as block and release, over 430 new catch animations, and improved defensive AI. The improved AI included much better play recognition, so running the option wouldn't be as easy, and throwing downfield was actually tough. It wasn't overpowered though, as somehow EA was able to make defense more aggressive while also making sure players had to have their head facing the ball in order to make a play on it. This is something EA has regressed in, as in Madden 24, defenders constantly make blind plays on the ball. Throwing off your back foot in NCAA 13 would cause the ball to come out wobbly and inaccurate, and with the new quarterback dropback animations, it was best to let your QB drop back himself rather than hold your stick back. This was probably the closest EA ever got to replicating the simulation style of gameplay seen in games like All Pro Football 2K8, and while the animations in 2K8 were a lot better, for an EA sports game, the gameplay in 13 is some of their best work. In NCAA Football 14, options are overpowered, but arguably more fun. In 13, the defense reads them better, making them less effective but more accurate to real life. If 14 has become too easy for you, 13 is a bit more challenging. Defensive logic is better. Blocking logic is better in 14, however, so your preference between the two really comes down to offense versus defense. Neither game is perfect. Some prefer 14 because it can be more fun to play a more offensive game, but simheads would probably prefer 13. I personally do. In terms of game modes, NCAA Football 13 was full of them. Dynasty Mode was of course the most popular mode from the game, and it may have peaked here in 13, depending on who you ask. When interviewing prospects, they actually give reasonable answers compared to 12. Saying you have the best campus in the country when you don't gets you laughed at. It's more difficult to recruit, and it's also more complex of a system overall. While 14 simplified the process, making it easier and faster, 13 had many more recruiting options to take advantage of. If you like something more detailed and realistic, recruiting in NCAA Football 13 will give you that. And while many prefer this game over 14 for that reason, I can still understand why some would prefer 14's more streamlined approach. It's subjective. Interestingly, when compared to 14, 13's long-term play in Dynasty Mode is better tuned because team ratings stay varied, with many teams still rated in the 50s, while others can be as high as 99. But in 14, after a few seasons, most teams are in the 70s and very few are above 90. There's a higher floor and a more consistent floor, but a lower ceiling, while 13 is more well-rounded and realistic overall. So Dynasty Mode in 14 is easier and quicker to just get to and play the actual football games. But if you want more depth, more realistic simulation stats, and more intelligent AI-controlled programs, 13 is where it's at. A really fun game mode found in NCAA Football 13 is the Heisman Challenge. Previous Heisman winners, including RG3, the cover athlete, are options to play with here, and you get to basically play a Road to Glory mode with that specific player, with goals related to their actual careers guiding you. So if you want to play with Carson Palmer and relive his career at USC, you can. It's a really fun take on Road to Glory, basically mixing the career mode with something similar to Madden Moments. Road to Glory itself was basically untouched from NCAA Football 12, but it was still a solid career mode with little fluff. The presentation in NCAA 12 was a game changer, adding in college traditions and unique pregame intros for each team, but 13 took it a step further, adding Aaron Andrews as a sideline reporter and scoring updates from Reese Davis. Overall, 14 was a bit better in the presentation department, but 13 was close, and for some, the graphics and lighting of 13 are a bit more true to life. The grass textures really catch my eye in 13. The rosters in 13 are a lot of fun to play with. The USC team with Matt Barkley, Robert Woods, and Marquise Lee. South Carolina had Clowney and Marcus Lattimore pre-injury. Geno Smith and Tavon Austin were lighting it up at West Virginia. Monte Ball was going off at Wisconsin. Aaron Murray was at Georgia, Sammy Watkins at Clemson. Denard Robinson, NCAA 14's cover athlete, was electric at Michigan. Keenan Allen was on California, DeAnthony Thomas at Oregon. AJ McCarron, Eddie Lacy, and Amari Cooper were at Bama. Le'Veon Bell was showing nice vision at Michigan State. And of course, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Zach Mettenberger, and Barkevious Mingo created a nice core at LSU. So many great players and teams were in this game. At the end of the day, both NCAA Football 13 and 14 are great games, but I can't help but think that 14 might just be a little overrated since it's the last game in the series, at least until later this year. NCAA Football 13 is a more difficult, challenging, and complex game, with a more simulation-centered focus to gameplay and more depth overall to Dynasty Mode. Many will still prefer 14 for being easier to play and more streamlined overall, but simheads will likely prefer 13, and for many, this game has flown under the radar as it's been heavily overshadowed by 14 for years. Coming from NCAA Football 12, 13 took some massive steps forward with gameplay, and while NCAA 14 may have slightly regressed in some areas such as defensive AI, it was also a great game, and it really makes you wonder just how good the series could have been had it been able to continue. Would NCAA Football 15, 16, and 17 been even better? Or would this series have fallen off in the same way Madden has? Regardless, it always felt like EA put a bit more passion and effort into these college games, and we can only hope that trend continues with College Football 25. If not, well, you can always go back and give NCAA Football 13 another go. For many, it's the greatest college football video game of all time. For me, I'll stick with NCAA 06 as my favorite, but 13 is probably my go-to choice for a 7th generation college football game, and it's a whole lot cheaper than 14. Thanks for watching.